What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Mighty Rewind podcast. Today, I want to talk about the home arcade space, one of my favorite topics to talk about. And there's a lot of angst out there right now within the community, within these companies themselves that are making these home arcades. And I think we need to dive in and talk about this a little bit today. Talk about where we've been, where we are now, and kind of what we're going. And most importantly, I want to talk about the truth, what I'm seeing right now on both ends. So today, no guests, just me. Let's get ready to talk about it. Before we talk about where we are now, I think we should spend a little bit of time talking about the past, like how this all came about, Arcade1up, and when they came on the scene, what it was like for us as home arcade enthusiasts, and how it kind of molded where we are today. So obviously, the beginning when Arcade1up first kind of launched, they were putting out some really great titles that we haven't seen, you know, in the home arcade space in our lifetime. And I think the excitement was really vast right off the get-go. I understand that a lot of these smaller, I wouldn't even call them three-quarter scale arcades were hitting the market. They were really like half-size arcades, right? Before they came out with the risers, stuff like that. And the titles they released right off the bat were really just nostalgic, right? Hit home. Street Fighter 2, Asteroids, Space Invaders, arcade classics that we grew up loving, right? Not only in the 80s, but also in the early 90s as well. So that nostalgic factor really, I think, made the home arcade space kind of take off from the get-go. And then, of course, they came out with the risers, and then, everything kind of took off from there. The Walmart thing, trying to find these cabinets in store, kind of hyped up the excitement, right? We were looking at our local Walmarts, trying to find deals if they were on sales. We were finding cabinets for $50, for $75, for $100, which kind of added to that excitement. But as Arcade1up grew, the demand from the community also grew. And that's kind of where everything kind of started to go downhill. So that was our backstory. We'll go into where we are now, but I want to talk about the main problems here, and we'll look at it from the community aspect, and we'll also look at it from the Arcade1up and these other home arcade companies aspects as well. So let's talk about what the issues are at hand in the home arcade space, right? Cabinets are getting more expensive. That is the main thing, and I don't think the quality is up to what home arcade enthusiasts are actually looking for as well. For a long time, supporters of Arcade1up and these companies, it feels like right now, the impulse buy of nostalgia is the only reason people are buying these machines, right? Back in the day, as I said before, people were going to try to look for these things on the cheap. That's what kind of got people into the space, in my opinion. If they weren't really like too crazy about arcades, maybe they didn't have the space or knowledge to keep them in their home, or, know what these things are really should do. So right now, people are thinking these are like a premium investment, and that's not really what I think the home arcade space should be. But right now in this community, people are asking, why am I paying more? Why are features still inconsistent, right? Why do some cabinets feel like upgrades and others feel like just re-releases? And that's where we've been over the past 3 years, just basically getting re-releases of cabinets we've already seen before. And part of that is because of licensing, obviously. Right? It's hard to get licenses for these titles, and I've been told that it's not always easy to find out who owns the licenses for these products. So with that said, I think Arcade1up needs to kind of listen more to the community, but also as a community, we kind of need to know where they're coming from, okay? On a side note, 4 or 5 years, 6 years even after, initial releases, the community of arcade enthusiasts are more educated than we've ever been. There aren't as many casual buyers as there were before. Right? Now we've turned into modders, we've turned into collectors, people who know PCB specs, monitor types, encoder boards, all that great stuff. So in the beginning, it was great to see these things finally hit your home, and it became like a little bit of a niche, and we've gotten even smaller as a community, believe it or not. So A lot of people got out of the game because they bought a bunch of titles and they have no more space. A lot of people are priced out now as well because of prices being so high. So the audience for home arcades has definitely matured and expectations are higher. Let's talk about us as a community and what we want for our home arcades. Because I think, to me, that is the biggest issue that is kind of talked about the most in all these YouTube videos, Facebook posts, Instagram posts, wherever you go to find your information regarding arcade and home arcade. That's what the gist of it is, in my opinion. So obviously the hardcore fans, we want new titles, licensing. That is the biggest issue. We want our favorite titles from the 1980s and into the mid, I think, 1990s. Arcade accuracy, right? The artwork, the look, and the layout. The playability is also another aspect of it, which I think it is kind of limited right now because of the technology we have. But obviously, a lot of collectors still flock to 3/4 scale, but I think a lot of us out there who are really serious about having arcades in our homes are looking for larger form factors, which we kind of have now with the XL Supreme. Whether it meets your expectations or not, that's a different story. We'll get into that. Larger screens is a huge issue that I think not a lot of people talk about enough. 17 inches is just not big enough, in my opinion. Even 19, depending on the cabinet size. In the Supreme, I still want a bigger size screen than a 19-inch screen for an XL Supreme cabinet. That is just me. And I think a lot of enthusiasts also want that as well. Better joysticks and buttons, that has been there since day one. We've only gotten a couple premium machines with better joysticks and buttons, and that quickly went away, of course. But these joysticks and buttons for me have been the biggest issue that I have seen collecting these Arcade1ups and these other companies as well. They're not as keen to give us that incredible arcade experience that we're all looking for, right? That's why we get into this space. That's why we talk about this space, why we buy some of these cabinets. We want that experience that we had growing up. Better sound is another issue, right? I think that has been kind of addressed a little bit. The sound has definitely gotten better with the two overlay speakers at the top. Online play, which to me it is not a big a factor to me, because when I grew up in the arcade, there was no online play. Yes, we got to play our friends that are right next to each other or join in on certain games as well, competing together. But to me, that is a lesser extent for me, but I know for other people out there who do follow the space, that's something that they really want to see on all titles going forward. And I think leaderboards is the last one that we talk about, that people who compete online against each other, they want those leaderboards, they want those statistics, they want that recognition if they are really good at a certain game. So, and lastly, they want all of this for a good price, an incredible price. We're not talking about $800, $900 for an XL Supreme. We're talking about $500 to $600, but there are challenges in that, so don't forget it. But I think I nailed this, and you guys let me know down in the comments. Is there anything out there that you mentioned besides, titles, form factor, screens, and everything that I mentioned before in an arcade that you're going to have in your home? Drop the comments down below. Hey everyone, this message is for brands, companies, publishers, and fellow creators. If you've got a product you'd like featured, reviewed, or showcased, I'd love to connect. Here at Mighty Comics and Collectibles, we are passionate about all types of collectibles, from comics to toy reveals, statues, and even event coverage, including content from places like Toy Fair. I'm always looking to spotlight cool, nostalgic, and innovative products that fit the collectible culture. I offer honest reviews, high-quality visuals, engaging thumbnails, and authentic reactions that collectors trust. Whether it's action figures, limited editions, exclusives, or new launches, I can create a dedicated review, unboxing, hype video, or event-style coverage. If you're a brand or independent creator and want your product in front of a passionate collector audience, reach out to me directly. Let's collaborate and create something awesome. So now let's flip it a little bit. Let's talk about the companies themselves, Arcade1up, Iconic Arcade a little bit. I want to delve into and the challenges that they're facing putting out some of these products into the community right now. So I don't think a lot of people understand how expensive everything is right now. Really, it's quite insane. You may think they're a toy company. You may think they're a home arcade company. What they are is actually a hardware company. And in 2026, it has not been easy. Even the the middle of 2025, still tremendously difficult to kind of put out a relatively affordable home arcade that everybody wants. But you got to consider the manufacturing costs are up globally right now tremendously. Shipping costs are fluctuating and still rather high, especially for these high weight items. Retail shelf space is very limited. I come from a retail background and a healthcare background, and I got to tell you right now, people are cutting down what they are keeping in stores. There's no question. Rents are through the roof, so they have to make sure whatever they're putting on their shelves is going to sell, because if not, they're kind of wasting that opportunity. But the main thing, obviously, is licensing. Licensing, I think, is more expensive than people talk about it. I said it a little bit before. It's not always easy to find on certain games who has the licenses. I was told that by a good friend of mine, but licenses is incredibly expensive. And that's why partially we're seeing the same games being released basically month over month, year over year. How many Pac-Man machines have we gotten? About 30? That's a little bit of an exaggeration, but you guys know what I mean, right? Then you got to add distribution through major retailers, customer service infrastructure, firmware updates, online functionality. That all costs money. I'd really love to know how many units they actually sell per cabinet, right? Especially with these cabinets that we aren't asking for. And we've gotten a lot of them, I think, over the past 3 or 4 years or so. But add all that up and let's talk about margins, right? Margins aren't what people assume they are. They're operating on razor thin margins. When we first saw Arcade1up come onto the scene, where were they? They were in Walmart almost exclusively and online. Then, of course, we started to see them in Target. We started to see them on Amazon, freaking Wayfair, Kohl's, Home Depot. You know, they're kind of everywhere. And that to me is part of the problem. Let's kind of consolidate where we're going to find these things. That I think that also helps. I understand from a business aspect, that's not what they want. They want to get their products into everybody's hand so everybody can make money. But when you go into the retail space and you ship a product and that product doesn't sell, you're not doing yourself any favors when it comes to reputation on the products that you're putting out, okay? At the end of the day, they have to make enough profit for this part of their business to be sustainable. And right now, at least for Arcade1up, before they got to basic fun, they haven't been doing that. Is it in part because they haven't been listening to the community? I think that's only part of it. I think obviously the economies and what things cost nowadays plays a big role into that as well. I do think they want to do right by us. There's no question in my mind. But you also have to understand, if the community is asking for something and you're not doing it, what does that say about you? So Arcade1up, I hope you're listening. Honestly, most companies don't just exist to be profitable. They need growth. And that's where the problem lies. Again, if they're not able to make a lot of profit and then grow at the same time, they're never going to go where we want them to go as arcade enthusiasts, as home arcade enthusiasts, right? Think about it. What happens if a cabinet doesn't sell at retail, even online, right? What happens, right? They get overloaded with stock. It's not just, oh, well, there's warehouse space, there's retailer relationships, which I talked about a little bit about, and there's capital tied up. So when you don't have money to kind of move on to the next cabinet that we're all clamoring for, it becomes a huge issue. So the community themselves, they kind of feel unheard, and I understand that, but also from the company aspect of it, these arcade companies, 1UP, Iconic Arcade, they also feel, I think, under-supported, right? They want to sell their cabinets. So we kind of go hand in hand. But what I will say is this: the community has to understand what things cost, but also these companies have to find a cheaper way to make the things that we want, or they won't sell product. Now, like I said, I want to talk a little bit about Iconic Arcade and what they're bringing to the community right now. Obviously, John D putting out a product that really looks great from the photos that I have seen. Again, we're getting another Street Fighter title, which I'm not really too happy about, considering I'm a big Street Fighter fan, don't get me wrong, and I think to have a larger form factor that really looks like, what we grew up with as kids, I think is awesome, but I'm just tired of Street Fighter at this point, right? I don't need another Street Fighter cabinet. How many iterations have we seen? We saw the original, we saw the Big Blue, and I think there was one more after that. So I've had the Big Blue. I've had it in my collection. I actually ended up getting rid of it. I do think it's one of the best cabinets that Arcade1up put out, in my opinion, but to me, I do not need another Street Fighter cabinet, but I also understand out there that is one of the premier titles out there, and Iconic is just getting started. So they want to put something out that really showcases what they're going to be able to do going forward in the future. Again, we've had people pre-order this product. No one has received it yet. There's been, quite a few delays, but they have shipped from overseas. Hopefully they'll show up in people's homes late April. I am excited for that. I did not pre-order that title, again, because I said I just tired of Street Fighter, but we'll see when it comes out. What I am extremely excited for is the Double Dragon photos that they released earlier, last year, I should say. So I was really excited about that because that is a title we have all been wanting for a really long time. I've talked about it in nauseum, on my channel about Double Dragon being one of my favorite games growing up as a kid and actually remembering where I played it for the first time. So to have that in my home, if it's everything that I'm seeing from Iconic Arcade, that's one I may pre-order as well. But I want to see what this Street Fighter looks like for people I know in the community, get their reviews, see how they've improved on it. But again, everything comes back to cost, space, what we're asking for as a community. But from the pics alone, I will say they look like they nailed this one. So I'm really excited for Iconic Arcade. But again, everything that I mentioned earlier, what we were looking for from the screen to the form factor to the online play, all those features, the artwork, they have to be there, right? I understand, us hardcore enthusiasts, we're going to mod these things anyway, but how much money do we want to put into them, right? Especially if they're going to keep making machines that I want to own. In the larger form factor, I'm limited on space. So I want to buy the cabinets that I see myself playing for a really long time. And I think that's one of the other issues that nobody talks about is we've seen a lot of titles, but how many have you kept in your home for the long term and still have to this day, from when you started about 6 years ago, whenever it was, to now, how many are still in your collection? I know some people have like 20 plus arcades in their home, which is fantastic. I can't do that. So the titles that I want to see come to market, that is the main thing when we're talking about home arcade. So I talked before about the community feeling unheard, right? We're talking about all these things we want. We've touched on it a bunch here today, and that these arcade companies are not actually listening. And I'll focus on Arcade1up here because Iconic hasn't shipped anything, and from the photos, we may get what we're looking for. And I think that, attributes to Arcade1up. They better get their crap together soon, because if they don't start giving us the things that we want, and Iconic does put out a product that is far superior for the same price, that could be it for them. So keep that in mind. But I do understand, when I spoke to them at least, that they're trying to put out things that we want to see as a community. I think social media also, and myself included, kind of amplifies both sides in a negative way sometimes. But small issues become, the company's doomed, and delays become they don't care as a community. They don't care as a company about the community. So I understand that fact. And that's unfortunately where we are as a world right now. Freaking social media is not always the greatest thing, right? Everything is out there. You cannot hide anything. So, and I'm part of the problem because I love talking about this stuff, just like other YouTubers out there. And I know I cover a lot of things between comics, toys, arcades, anything nostalgia, because that's what I really want to talk about. So the home arcade space is incredibly small. I don't think people understand how small this actually is. If you talk about other things that we enjoy, like me, comics, it's a more vast community. Yes, it appeals to, again, same age range, I think, older people who grew up with arcades, but there are more comic collectors and more toy collectors out there than there are home arcade enthusiasts, right? Most people are married. Most people have kids. They don't really focus on bringing a lot of these big pieces into their home. So the space itself is trying to survive in a shrinking discretionary spending market. And that's just really how it is. So I'll touch on this, the Sonic arcade that was announced by Arcade1up over at Toy Fair that I covered, and I know other people covered as well. What was the thought process behind that? Why are we taking a console game and bringing it to a home arcade space, right? I'm going to tell you this. I think having a well-known name like Sonic is going to kind of draw people who don't go out every year and buy 3 cabinets, right? You're going to get some people who are like, oh, I remember Sonic. How cool would it be for me to have a home arcade cabinet of Sonic the Hedgehog in my home? And maybe some of their kids know who Sonic is. There've obviously been some movies out there as well about the property, so that could bring in some younger kids as well. But as arcade enthusiasts and people who grew up with it, we never played Sonic in the freaking arcade. It never happened. If I want to play a Sonic game, guess what? I'll go buy a used Sega Genesis for $50 and buy Sonic the Hedgehog, probably 1, 2, and whatever other titles out there for under $30, $40, $50 and bring it home and have that experience that I remember having for that game in my home. So do I want to spend $800+ after we talk about tax to own a game that I could play for $100? And that's where I think these companies miss the mark, right? Now, with that said, how many games out there that were ported to consoles that the consoles really didn't do it justice? Those are the things that these arcade companies should be focused on, right? Like we could talk about Double Dragon. It was ported to the NES and it was a good game on NES, but we never had the same experience as going to an arcade and playing that for the first time. Another example I talk about all the time is Paperboy, right? Paperboy, another one was ported to the NES, which I still love it on the NES, but you don't get that feeling of riding that bike and using that handlebar and throwing those papers over the place. It is not the same experience. Still enjoyable, don't get me wrong, but how many of you out there would buy a paperboard cabinet and you had some other motocross games that could be available via license or driving games, whatever you want to add for that genre of game to the cabinet? I think that would be a massive hit. Now, we could talk about 3/4 versus Supreme. I'd still rather the Supreme version for that game, but again, I understand licensing is an issue, but they have put out Paperboy before on a freaking regular arcade with buttons and a joystick, which was absolutely ridiculous in my mind. So I understand where they're going with Sonic because they want a household name, but I also understand that nobody from the home arcade community, us as enthusiasts, are going to purchase that game. I'll tell you right now, Arcade1up, it's not going to happen unless there's a fear of missing out, right? That they say, I have almost every Arcade1up game there is. I have to get it so I can complete my collection. That is my thought process when we're talking about Sonic. Let's also touch on the good, right? They did put out a title that all of us wanted, WrestleFest. So obviously they are listening to us. They do want to put out titles that I think people want to have in their homes that they remember playing growing up as kids. I also understand that licensing is an issue, right? We're missing some of the characters in the game. The 3/4 scale or ultra version, whatever they're calling it, didn't meet expectations, not only because of the missing characters, also because of the artwork, because of the form factor. I think it was a little small and tight, in my opinion. The marquee was washed, but you saw them fix it so far with the Supreme cabinet. From all eyes, I saw this thing at Toy Fair, the marquee was fixed. It's so much better than the ultra version of the cabinet. It is so much better. Again, playability was good, but you're missing some of the main characters. But that's not something I think that should be blamed on them. Those are hard gets, and it's going to cost a lot of money to get those characters in the game. And you have to focus, and you have to understand that there has to be concessions. There's no question. The artwork was a lot better on the Supreme as well. Not as good as it should have been, in my opinion. But again, the machine itself looked and played to me like it might actually be worth it at $600. $650 plus tax, it gets a little tight. If you want the game and you're a wrestling fan, you want to pick it up. There's no question. I think if you really want that game and it's one of your favorites, you hope somebody can put out a soft mod to add those characters in. And I think you got a pretty decent cabinet, in my opinion. So Arcade1up, if you're listening, and I hope you are, this is what your strategy should be, okay? Really, really listen to me here. I don't think we need 5 cabinets a year. I'll be on record saying that. I think you're going to get yourself in trouble if you decide to do that. I think you should put out a brand new cabinet every year, new title, and a title that the home arcade community enthusiasts really, really want in an XL form and a deluxe form. I want you to ship them at the same time. This way, people from both sides of it, whether you live in an apartment and you lack space, or you want that Supreme Edition because you want the nostalgic feel of playing on a larger, arcade machine, you should release them at the same time. So I count that as one cabinet, okay? 2 sizes, 1 cabinet. The next thing I want to see is a cabinet that you have released before in a smaller form factor, released in an XL Supreme size. So we could talk about Golden Tee. I know there was one already that they had out that was exclusive to the big box stores, Sam's Club or Costco, wherever that machine was. I want to see a cabinet like Return of the Jedi put out in a Supreme form that's already been released and that 3/4 scale form. I think that is a good way to kind of also be on the right track when we're talking about being in good standing with the arcade community and making money also on the back end. I also think you need to release another cabinet as well. So we've said so far a Supreme cabinet and an Ultra in a brand new title that we actually want, a smaller cabinet re-released in a Supreme size. And then I understand as a business, you want to release a household name cabinet, a la a Sonic, a la, something else that everybody knows. I'm not going to give you examples, but there has to be a cabinet on their end, whereas they have to hit the mainstream. That's how they're going to make money to kind of move forward in this space. They can't just appeal to us. I'm going to be honest with you guys. They cannot just do it because they're just giving us what we want. They're not going to make any money. We want everything I mentioned before between screens, joysticks, games, form factor, all that. If they give us all that stuff, they're not going to make any money. And I understand that as a businessman, someone who's come from a business background, a healthcare, a retail space, they have to do something for the mainstream. So on the community aspect, you guys have to understand it. And on the Arcade1up side, and I'll include all these other companies, you have to give us something mainstream as well as something for the enthusiasts. So that's kind of, I think, what the truth is and where we should go if I was a company focused on home arcade, right? We have to kind of reach everybody. I do think your main focus should be on the arcade enthusiasts. Those are the people buying these cabinets. But I also understand as a business, we talked about profit, we talked about growth, we talked about reaching the masses. That's a big part of it, okay? So the golden hype of early home arcade days, those days are gone. Like that's the lightning in a bottle moment. I don't think we're ever going to see that again. So right now we have to be in what I'm calling the maturity phase. People have to understand on both sizes. That means tighter wallets, smarter consumers, higher expectations, slower impulse buys. So I don't think this is a collapse of home arcade. It's kind of evolution. And we kind of have to understand, but also these companies have to kind of jump on board into what we want. The question is, who's going to adapt first, right? Is it going to be us as a community? Are we going to be like more understanding to what these arcade companies need in order to kind of thrive in the space? Or are we going to wait for them to answer all our prayers and put out the absolute best cabinets possible, which we want? And I think it has to be both. I think there's no way around it. That's why I suggested like the 3 cabinets a year. What we want, what needs to be for the masses, and then kind of something that is like a surprise. So that's just my take for the companies. Be transparent. You're going to have loyalty. Don't over communicate, because I think that if you over communicate like you have in the past and say, we're going to be doing this, and then we get something totally different, you're going to see the backlash that we've already seen over the Sonic arcade. So focus on fewer and focus on better releases. The licensing is the most important thing. And I understand that's out of our control as an arcade community, but you need to acquire it. That is going to keep you going forward to put out some arcades that we want to see and keep this, kind of dream that we have as arcade enthusiasts alive. Because I know that's part of a dream for all of us growing up. If you were a kid growing up like I was in the 1980s, you saw shows like, I forgot the name of the show, Silver Spoons. That's what it was. You saw us, watch that show and see these kids have like pinball machines and arcade machines in their home. And that's something we always wanted. So to have that now as a possibility, we want it the way we want it. But as a community, we also have to understand that scale is not always attainable. Cost reality is not always attainable, right? We're in a different world and a different space than we were back in 2020, 2021. So you have a choice. Support the products that they're making. Keep advocating for what we want, but it's a two-way street. So if the company ignores your feedback, the fans are going to stop buying. And what happens when the fans stop buying? There's shit left on the shelves. The retailers get annoyed. They have to kind of blow out their inventory. Then all of a sudden they don't order the next wave of product that gets released. So it's really like just an avalanche of stuff that happens. So I'm going to plead to Arcade1up to please not just listen to us, but start putting out the things that we want. Start putting out the titles that going forward are going to keep us interested in this hobby, because that's really what it is. Lastly, I want to say I'm really excited about Iconic Arcade. From the pictures that I've seen, I know I've said this before, but I want titles. I want titles in that form factor with correct joysticks and buttons and layouts and everything we talked about before, screens, form factors. I understand it's going to be a more expensive product, but we have to try to work that price down. Hear me, Arcade1up, same thing. You have to try to work these prices down. I understand profitability and growth is a thing. I understand it's a blockage into where you want to go for your company. But if you want to be in the arcade space, you're going to do what I asked you to do. 3 arcade cabinets a year. That's it. Nothing more. I think anything past that is overkill. Give us the titles we want. Work on licensing and put out those titles. The last thing I want to mention to everybody out there is that for you to use the people who have voices in this community, that doesn't mean you have to listen completely, but if you want feedback, I've seen other people in the comic space, if you follow that space, great. If you don't, I understand, but they've taken notes from other people in the community about what should be done, right? For the people who have a voice in this small niche that we're in, listen to those people. Maybe give them some insight. Hey, can we do this? This is our cost. What do you think we could do? Involve them in it if you need to. There's not stupid people. I shouldn't say that. There are some stupid people in this community. I'm not going to lie to you, but there are some really smart, educated people who kind of can help you if you let them. So that is my message to both of you guys. Please, we want to keep this thing going. I'm going to leave you guys with this. I've been on the ground. I've been an arcade enthusiast my whole life. And when the home arcade space kind of boomed a few years ago, I was really, really excited to the fact that at one point, I think I had 8 or 9 arcades, which may seem a lot to you or may not. But my excitement really has dwindled because of the releases that we got, and unfortunately, some of the things that were left off those releases. So I cover Toy Fair. I see the excitement or the non-excitement. I see behind the scenes what's going on in the community. I see it also from the company's aspect. I don't think these brands are villains, and I think the fans are also not entitled. But at the same time, if we can't come together on a product that we all want, this thing is doomed, and people will focus on their own mods and stuff like that. And that may be an okay thing. I think mods are really cool. They get better every year. So maybe that's an aspect that everybody kind of needs to go and attack and see if that fits their personal style. But I understand that we want that nostalgia feeling, right? We want that 1980s, early 90s nostalgia feeling in our home. And there's only so much that these arcade companies can do. If you'd like to become a sponsor here on the Mighty Rewind podcast, make sure you reach out at the Mighty Rewind podcast at gmail.com.